Вас занять места в зале. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the 7th International Forum Primakov Readings starts the second working day. Please take your seats. Уважаемые дамы и господа, мы начинаем работу специальной сессии выступления министра иностранных дел Российской Федерации Сергея Лаврова. Модератор сессии – президент Института мировой экономики и международных отношений имени Примакова Александр Дынкин. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we are starting special session speech by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation Sergey Lavrov, moderator of the session, president of the Institute of World Economy and International Relations, Alexander Dynkin.
Александр Александрович, добрый день.
Доброе утро, Сергей Викторович.
Good morning, Sergey Viktorovich. I'm happy to welcome you at Primakov Readings. You are a great friend of our forum, and one of who supported the idea of its organization, and you have not missed a single of the 7 fora that we have had so far. Sergey Viktorovich, I suggest that you take the floor first and then take questions from the audience and online, offline, and so those who are listening in. Yeah, all right. Yes, I can hear you well. Yes, please. Do you agree with this agenda? Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Alexander Alexandrovich. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, I am honored to be invited to participate at Primakov readings. That's one of the most authoritative, although the youngest international dialogue site and of professional dialogue. And I would like to give special thanks the IMMO management for organizing this site and for the organizational work that has been done to prepare this meeting in spite of the pandemic challenges and constraints. And certainly I would like to welcome all the participants of the forum, representatives of Russian and international export community. So the dialogue at this stage on all questions of the mankind and the universe is very important. So the readings are related directly to the intellectual legacy of the great state authority, Mr. Primakov. So when he was Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, so he laid the principles and the foundation of the international principles, multi-vector, responsibility, respect to international law, and openness to cooperation with all those who are ready to do it on an equal and fair basis. These principles were laid at the foundation of the concept of international policy that in the year of 2000, after the election of the president who became Mr. Putin, so then, and now just we have a rewrite of these principles of 2016, but all these principles that were laid down by the academician Primakov, they have a great deal of continuity. And for Russia, the great advantage is that so these principles allow us to guarantee the predictability and sustainability of our international policy, and this is extremely important in the conditions where the whole world system is going through a very controversial period of its development and is under much stress and turbulence. And as the Chinese wisdom says, that these challenges open up a lot of opportunities that we need to take an advantage of and to use them for the benefit of all peoples of the world. So we can see how the positive trends are getting stronger. And I would like just to mention here so the new centers of economic and political influence and so democratization of international communications in general between the countries. So this process actually was predicted in the 90s of the last century by Mr. Primakov, and it's in his concept of the multipolar world. So Russia certainly will contribute to the continuation of peaceful changes towards polycentric nature of the world based on collective leadership of the leading states in addressing the global issues. But we are all realists, and we cannot ignore the absence of desire of Western colleagues, even just belligerent, so negation of the objective reality the way it is, and so then the desire of the collective West to guarantee the privileged position of their countries in the world, whatever the cost. And certainly, so the main results of the upcoming summit of G7 and the format of the EU, the United States, will be decisive. So not only Russia, but many other countries face the fact that the representatives of the West are not ready for the fair dialogue. And so they prefer to act in the spirit of highly likely. And so there are many examples of that, and that certainly undermines the trust to the idea of dialogue as a means of regulating settlement of disputes and controversies, and certainly dilutes the essence of international relations. And so this desire with which the Western colleagues started to promote the concept based on rules. So the rules. This notorious concept, and so the concept, even the UN Charter, at the end of the day, is a set of rules. But the rules universally accepted, comprehensive, coordinated with all members of the international, so no one puts it in doubt. And this is what we call international law. So and the UN Charter is the main integral part and its foundation of the international law. And our Western colleagues, when they abandon the use of the term international law and apply the principles of the world order based on rules, what they mean is they want to develop in the Western-centric formats certain approaches that later are conveyed as the idea of multilateralism and the highest order of truth. And so there's chemical weapons in this area, journalism, by the way, so the position of journalists in the international cyber security and the international humanitarian law. On all these issues, so there are universal comprehensive organizations, but our colleagues, first and foremost in the EU and the United States, they want to promote their own concept, their own agenda on each of these areas. And so the question, why won't we do it in a highest structure of multilateralism, which is the UN? So there is no answer to that. But it's obvious for us, certainly it's much more difficult, much more challenging to promote their own initiatives and get agreements in a universal, comprehensive format. So where we have, so there's Russia, China, Brazil, and not only the countries that are always ready to obey. And so that's how this new concept of the world order based on rules, how it will change and bifurcate, so from the viewpoint of the new events, the so-called the Summit of Democracy that President Biden is promoting, and initiatives in the area of multilateralism that President Macron and some other European leaders announced. And I'm convinced that we cannot but ignore the obvious fact that the modern world is a sum of agreements of the countries victors in the Second World War, and Russia certainly will doubt those who will want to doubt the results of World War II, and we will certainly reject that. So I will not play along to those who will try to turn back the natural movement of history. We don't have that any ambitions, super ambitions. We don't have it. We don't have this messiah assertiveness with which our Western colleagues are trying to expand all over the world, trying to enforce their democratic agenda all over the world. So we know that the previous results of these attempts never worked out well. So look at Libya, Yemen, Afghanistan, Iraq. And so the specifics of the current moment is a pandemic, and the coronavirus certainly sped up the events, but not only addressed the existing issues, but created new challenges. I'm talking about the global GDP decline, so then this supply chains decline, isolationism, geographical opportunism, and many other problems that appeared on the ground. And this common problems is a good reminder of unprecedented interconnection, interdependence. So no one can hide in a quiet haven and survive. That's one of the main lessons that we need to learn from from the pandemic. So we call for cooperation with everyone. Just let me repeat again, on the basis of mutual cooperation and looking for the balance of interests. And we see the independent value in every international partner, in the multilaterally, unilaterally, and we value the friendship with everyone who is ready to reciprocate and ready to look for fair agreements rather than bossing around and using the words of ultimatums. And so these are the reasons that the issues that we're ready to discuss, and they cover all important spheres of human life: security, trade, climate, digital transformation, AI, and many others. So we are promoting our approaches in Eurasia and on the principles that I spoke about. So then we have the Commonwealth of States, and then we have SCO and CSTO, and so they all function very well. And so they are based on the principles of voluntary principles, on the principles of mutual benefits. So there are no bosses, there are no subordinates, and all these organizations operate on the basis of creation, and they're not aimed at everyone, and they don't oppose anyone, and do not claim to expand their values and extend them all over the world, the way we see it in other integration structures. So among our priorities is the comprehensive cooperation, strengthened cooperation with China. So we are celebrating the 23rd anniversary of the new agreement that was signed, and the privileged strategic partnership with India. That's the way it's formulated, it's phrased in the documents that were signed at the summit level. So we depend the membership with the ASEAN members and other countries of the Pacific and Asian Pacific area. So this unification philosophy that was put forward by President Putin, the initiative to contribute to the creation of the big Eurasian partnership, open for everyone without exception of our Eurasian continent, and certainly, so then if you part of it, so that enhances your opportunities in this highly competitive world of all Eurasian countries, understanding that they will certainly be having and be enjoying these God-given advantages, and we're not going to draw new demarcation lines and deepen the old ones. And this big Eurasian partnership is supported by China and India, and it's very highly evaluated with the framework of SCO. So we're discussing with the ASEAN countries, as I was saying. So when we have talks with the European Union as our natural neighbor on this huge continent, and I think that this fora, like Primakov readings, are an ideal site for the discussion of ideas that occur in this relationship, and certainly there could be some alternative approaches, but we want this discussion to be aimed into the future in the interests of all countries of this huge region. Russia will definitely continue to be actively helping to settling international conflicts. So we work in Syria, we helped to bring peace, we're helping to bring peace to this country after the bloodshed ended in Nagorno-Karabakh. So we're helping our international efforts to settle issues in Afghanistan, in Libya, around Iran, on the Korean island, and many other hot spots. And I'm talking about that not to attract and not to boast, to attract attention to our achievements. We don't have an inferiority complex, and we don't have the complex of that. We're not full of ourselves as well, but we are ready to help those who need that. And so because we go back many centuries using this approach. and will continue to be, in our view, so first sight. So some issues like as the Eastern regulation and settlement, we want so then to resume the quartet of international mediators, and so we're promoting collective security in the Persian Gulf area. So we're open for the speedy organization of the leaders of Palestine and Israel and Moscow. So we know the cause. So we need just to wait for the results of political processes in Israel, and we're ready to host that. But to a great chagrin, so our multilateral and many reminders to the fact that you cannot promote the concept of regulation of relations between Israel and the Arabs to the detriment of Palestine is not possible. But unfortunately, it has been repeatedly ignored, and so that's why this problem is going to exacerbate only. So we're promoting very actively so the case of coordination of multilateral format within the framework of the UN, coordination of the rules of responsible behavior in the information space, and we promote our work and fight the coronavirus. And I'd like to stress, in spite of the fact what they try to ascribe to us in the West, we are interested in the pragmatic, mutually beneficial relations with any country, including the EU or the United States or the NATO neighbors or Europe or the EU, and we are ready for that. We are promoting a whole series of initiatives not to allow the total destruction of the agreement in the area of deweaponization, disarmament, non-proliferation, and after the Americans destroyed many of the agreements, for example, so the method of the IRNF treaty, so they suggested we suggested the unilateral moratorium on their deployment in Europe, but in spite of the mechanism of verification that we suggested to ensure this moratorium, the West is trying to avoid and evade this honest talk. And so it's more than 2 years that they are just talking it over, and so very specific, very concrete, very obvious proposals of ours that are aimed at the de-escalation of the danger on the along the boundary of Russia and the West. So we're ready to jointly work with any partner, but certainly we're not ready for a zero-sum game and no ultimatums, no sanctions. They don't work to talk to us, and they will never achieve any results. And in conclusion, I would like to quote Mr. Primakov: "The strong Russia today should not be associated with the threat to stability of Europe and the rest of the world, because it's only the inertial status of mind can result from the fact if they try to treat Russia as a source of threat. So Russia will always be staunch and loyal to its spiritual principles and legacies and tenets, and Russia will do everything it's possible to do to promote non-confrontational interests of Russia and mutual cooperation with the widest possible gamut of the states." And I'd like to stress that we should not mistake our dialogue to talk to any partner for a weakness, because our president said several times that the red line we were going just to determine the red lines in our relationship with international partners. We're going just to stand for our views at the way the world is organized and at the way we think the world should develop in total conformity, in total compliance with the values reflected not only in some narrow coordinated documents but in the Charter of the UN. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sergey Viktorovich. I would like to say that Primakov readings so generate a lot of interest. More than 500 people listen to you from the conference room, and we would have 3 times as many. And we have some experts. Some managed to make it here. Some are online. And I'd like to express my gratitude once again. If you don't mind, let's move over to the session of questions and answers. First question from Mr. Wolfgang Schussel, so head of the Forum Dialogue Europe-Russia, Federal Chancellor of Austria in 2000-2007. So, if I may, I'd like just to join this question. So, the meeting between the leaders of Russia and the United States is an important milestone in the global development of affairs that brings in new vectors in the work of the military, business, and politics and economy. And so, not all meetings were successful. For example, the recent summit in Helsinki, so with the participation of the 45th President of the United States, this time. So we hope it will be better. So President Biden is interested in control over the weapons and the Iranian deal. So question, what are your expectations from the new agenda after the meeting of the 2 leaders? On all questions, cyber security, autonomous weapons, regional conflicts here, Afghanistan, Libya, and North Korea. I'm happy to welcome my good old friend Wolfgang Schussel, and I'd like to thank him for the question. We have repeatedly verbalized our position in connection with the upcoming summit in Geneva on June 16th. So we do not build high hopes. We have no illusions that there will be some breakthroughs. But there is an objective necessity to exchange opinions at the top level as to what threats are perceived by the United States and Russia in the international arena, and the mere fact of the talk between the 2 leaders of the leading nuclear powers naturally is extremely important, and we support it in every possible way. So the spirit of our American colleagues is very well supported, because the normalization of Russia-American relations, let me repeat again, is possible only if we pursue the principles of equality, mutual respect, non-interference in our domestic affairs. This is the position sine qua non that certainly allows us to build stable and predictable dialogue. This is very important to remove the confrontational tensions that have accumulated between our countries, and we'll be ready for that. But during the preparation for the summit, those who are in the Biden administration are dealing with Russia, how to put it better, so kind of Sovietologists, I don't know just what to call them now. So I hope it would be Russia filials, and I hope that those Russia filials will evaluate the interests and the actions and the position of Russia, that they will recognize and acknowledge our red lines, and if they want to do the work on the mistakes and abandon conducting dialogue on the basis of the position on the claiming the hegemony of the United States. So then any dialogue is better than its absence, but there is this hegemonic mentality that will and then if our American colleagues will continue to follow in the wake of their own propaganda that actually and the elites, American elites supports that, then we cannot. There will be not much to write home about. But we need just to exchange our opinions, and then even if there are some divergences, and for some they are unsurmountable, but I think that our common interest in the strategic stability is there, and so we have good contacts as to how we will approach this area of the world global policy. I can tell you directly that we are calling for the comprehensive approach for taking into account in our follow-up dialogue with the United States all factors that may impact negatively strategic stability: nuclear, non-nuclear forces, advancing and defense forces. Everything that influences the strategic stability needs to be subject of the dialogue. So then Americans have a more narrow dialogue. They're interested only in some aspects of our nuclear triad, and they are not. They have no propensity at this stage to agree for the comprehensive concept that would include everything without any exclusion. So we'll see. I hope that the presidents, on the basis of the information consultations that have been going on, so during the preparation for the summit, will determine the strategic main trunk line for our future efforts. And Wolfgang, you mentioned cybersecurity. This is true, and we have a lot of goodwill. And in 2016, when the administration Obama started to complain about that we're interfering in their elections, we repeatedly, dozens of times, we suggested that we should sit at the negotiation table and speak about the facts and put the facts on the table, and all the concerns that one country has, another country has. So let's discuss it. But they categorically negated that. They refused to do that, rejected this. And so then we'll discuss it and we'll understand to what extent the Biden administration is ready to conduct fairly our negotiations along these lines. So we spoke about North Korea, Libya, and Afghanistan. On all these issues, especially in Afghanistan and North Korea, and sometimes some aspects of the Syrian crisis and the Libyan situation. So we have good contacts. We have been working jointly with Americans, with the multilateral institutions that have been formed and have been recognized by the world community. And I mean, negotiations on the nuclear problem of the Korean Peninsula, what we refer to as the expanded triad, United States and Pakistan, and so then we have bilateral mechanism on Syria that takes care of the conflicting issues, and we naturally suggest every time and again the illegality of the presence of the United States forces on Syrian soil. And moreover, so this presence goes hand in hand with the plundering of natural resources. They export oil from oil deposits, agricultural, and so with the money they make, they support, and it's all obvious. It's the writing is on the wall. They support the separatist trend on the eastern bank of the Euphrates, and then they are toying with the Kurds problem, etc. That will end very badly. So then, since they are present with the military forces on Syria, they have the aviation there, and we have the conflicting program along the lines of our ministers of defense. So sometimes we hold political consultation as to how we need to proceed in the future, so that we would be interested that the United States would resume their activities as a witness in the Austinine format, and that would be and then to 2254 resolution of the UN that they would abide by. It would be great that they would abide by that resolution. So there is no coordinated agenda, so that our colleagues from the European Union. So when we had relations some time ago, when we had structures of good relationship, and so they paid mostly attention to the verbatim coordination of every point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that later should become turned into the agenda of the negotiations. With the Americans, we didn't have it. We took all points, one point, another point, and that's the way we proceed right now. We continue to work, and there's not much time left to wait, and everything will clear up very soon. And we're very much interested in the positive results of the summit. But as the they say, so it takes two to tango, and but if someone dances break dance and alone, that's more challenging. Okay, questions from the floor, please. Mike there. So please introduce yourself. Fyodor Vitalovsky, MMO director. So I'm sorry that I abuse the right of the organizer, but I think that this is the question that concerns everyone. The Trump administration destroyed the mechanism of the liquidation of IRNF. And so then Russia decided to take a bona fide approach, so they offered the United States and the NATO members on the introduction of the moratorium for deployment of intermediate missiles in Europe, but there was no response from the United States. There was kind of sluggish, murky response from the EU. But is there a dialogue going on, and do you think this moratorium is possible eventually? So the agreement, the IRNF treaty, so is sank into oblivion. It's not there anymore. And so it is true that you mentioned very important fact that it happened, so we expressed our disappointment, but even announced, not only just suggested to the President Trump, so that we would keep a moratorium for the deployment of intermediate missiles on our land, and so of the systems that were banned by the previous treaty on our territory, as long as the similar systems of American production, American manufacture, do not appear in different regions. So this was a unilateral moratorium. Then later, a couple of years ago, when this moratorium did not elicit any interested response, President Putin took yet another step. So he sent an address not only to the United States, but all NATO members and all members of the EU, our eastern neighbors. I think about 50 countries were addressed, where he spoke extensively and spoke about our decision about the unilateral moratorium, but added this initiative with offering to cooperate, so that the Western countries voluntarily would announce their own moratorium. So that's kind of a bona fide gesture. So not like legally binding document. And in this address, we took into consideration the condition that after we announced the moratorium unilaterally, so for the deployment of surface systems banned by the previous agreement, so the West started to say skeptical things. So Russia is too sly. They deployed Iskanders in Kaliningrad Oblast, and the Iskander missiles, they violate the parameters set by the previous agreement, and we, the NATO members, don't have anything like that, but they have the Iskanders, and that is why it would be not an equal and fair exchange. But first, no one ever managed to prove that the Iskander, our famous systems, violate the criteria and bans set concerning the distance of the missiles in the former IRNF treaty, and Americans refuse to show proof. So even now they doggedly refuse to provide the space shots that were made in July 2014 when the accident with the Malaysian Boeing occurred. So then the Netherlands court said that the hopes that the Americans would provide those shots are no more of pictures, and so that's why the court proceedings closed. And so this is extremely important facts. They are just hiding them. They're keeping them secret, and say no one shows us space shots, satellite shots that the Americans used to prove or affirm that the Iskander missiles violate the INF Treaty. And remembering that the West has done everything, but the West has not yet had time to do that, and we suggest that we freeze, and will be certainly in favor of the Russian Federation. So in Putin's address, it was said, understanding the mutual distrust, so we suggest we verify. So namely, we suggest that you visit Kaliningrad Oblast and see with your own eyes, so the Iskanders launch equipment, so that our specialists visited our bases of anti-missile defense in Romania and Poland, and so that because the manufacturer of launching pads, Lockheed Martin, openly promotes these launching pads as having double use, both so then Tomahawks, offensive weapons, defensive weapons, they can be used for both. And Lockheed Martin was saying that to that effect. So that's why this double application of those anti-missile defense machines. So the only president of France, Mr. Macron, so he said it's a good idea and he's ready to participate, provided that the multilateral dialogue would be established. The dialogue didn't work. The Americans ignored that because they don't want to let anyone in to the basis of anti-missile defense. They don't want to let anyone in. But everyone, so they just kept silent. That's why our proposal stands, and I think that will certainly remind about this proposal at the summit in Geneva. So one more suggestion. One more question from the floor, please. Thank you, Sergey Viktorovich. Bulgaria, Russia Forum. So I'm happy to see you. So you, especially, you have repeatedly have been saying that the European Union is not a reliable partner. Unfortunately, this is true, especially against the background of crazy, strange Russophobic propaganda, and so when they and lots of proofs of the scandal. So you have a great deal of political experience, very deep experience. Do you think that this deficit of leaders in the EU will it be able, at least partially, so be made up by the elections that will take place in Germany and other EU countries? Do you think that this crisis that is occurring in the European Union so will be able to change the situation with the United States, and whether we will be able to carry out our missions of the European countries, and that certainly provides for the cardinal changes of the politics of the EU towards Russia, and we need to remember about the inefficient and unfair sanctions and go back to trust and dialogue to address common issues, and without the full comprehensive dialogue with Russia, including, we'll never be able to decide and resolve these issues. And certainly we're waiting for you in Bulgaria for the opening of our installation dedicated to Mr. Primakov. Thank you, Svetlana. I'm happy to see you, and I will definitely come. And if there is inshallah, I will definitely come. And if our relations are improving, and but certain factors that have become obvious do not contribute to the follow-up development of the constructive dialogue. And with regards to your question and about the EU relationship, I have repeatedly spoken about that. We want to have the EU relations that would be equal, mutually beneficial, and we cannot possibly have relations with the European Union that would be based on the requests or demands for Russia to change its behavior, and so many leaders of the EU spoke about that. and so we need to be friends with Russia. But when they were not saying just to be friends with Russia, we need to be partners with Russia. They've been saying that. But first, Russia needs to change its behavior. That's what they were saying. And this is the whole mentality that is impossible to change. I was talking about the order based on rules. So they thought it up, invented it. But this actually, at the end of the day, is the Western vision as to how develop relations in the 21st century between the states. And moreover, so how to live, how to organize the life inside the states. And because so these messianic processes with promoting democracy everywhere, they are regressive to some extent. But once you start talking with the West about democracy at the international arena, let's discuss how to promote democracy not only inside the countries, because there's a concern of each specific state, but on international relations, so that everyone would be equal, so that would listen to the majority, the voice of the majority. They immediately hide, and they don't want just to discuss democratization. And the whole concept of the world order based on the rules, it actually strikes out. So the idea that the West will be involved in the discussions of real democratization in international relations. So then that's just in May, so President Macron promoting one of the main elements of the concept of the global order based on order. So he spoke about of efficient multilateralism, and he said directly that the multilaterality does not mean the necessity to get agreement of everyone. So then the position of conservatives should not be the hurdle for ambitious people who think in advanced manner and who just move forward, because the conservatives are revisionists. We can refer to them, they're the antonyms, so but China and us, so they call us conservatives who do not want the changes, and revisionists who want to slow down what the West has been promoting for a while. And simultaneously, President Macron never mentioned the United Nations or the international law. That's why this ambitious avant-garde that promote these people, and then so there are other factions that they want to adhere to the principles of the UN Charter, and that's the main problem. And this, by the way, that's exactly what the president of the country is saying. So, which is the only country left among those who some time ago appealed to the strategic autonomy of the European Union. But even in Germany, these discussions were quenched, and like at one of the events of the European Union, so the chairman of the Euro Council, Jean Michel, was so he was extolling the return of the United States of the Euro-Atlantic solidarity, and it was obvious to what extent. So everyone felt relief. The EU management, that everything just came back to normal. The United States again at the helm, and will be able to follow them in their wake. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I don't think that no one just because that's a fact that's publicly announced. The evaluation and assessment that was many times pronounced by the EU managers. There was a Munich conference in May on security. Michel was saying that the alliance of the United States and Europe is the basis of the world order based on rules, and the international law was not even in the cards. And so that is why. So that's why we need to promote democracy, to protect this rule against the attacks of China and Russia. So we need to promote democracy, to protect these rules against the authoritarian regimes. So it ensues that the democracy should be promoted inside these countries and not in the international arena. So here it's not they can expose themselves. So without any, so they're just promoting the concepts which are openly, egregiously have the nature of domination or claiming for domination. and Ursula von der Leyen was saying that in the era of digital transformation, for example, so we needed Russia and Europe to develop some kind of book of rules that the whole world should follow. And recently, our American colleagues, I don't remember who said that, they said that the new rules of trade and should be determined by the West and not by China. And what does it mean? So what does it mean? Just like a small digression. So now, so we are talking about the reforms of the International Trade Organization, because Americans understood one simple thing, that on the basis, WTO, that on the basis of the rules that were approved currently in the global economy, global trade, that have been initiated by the United States after World War II, meaning the Bretton Woods systems, and International Monetary Fund, International World Trade Organization, etc. On the basis of these rules that determine the evolution of globalization and initiated by the Americans first and foremost. So then, on the basis of these rules, so China achieved much more. So playing Americans and beating them at their own weapon, and that is why now they're blocking and they do not allow to appoint public officials for the regulation of settlement of disputes. They don't allow that to nominate people there, and then all the suits that have been surrendered to this body, and that the Americans would have lost all these cases cannot be considered there, and that is why we're talking about creating a new system and to reform the WTO, and then they're saying that the new trading rules should be determined by Europe and the United States, but not China. And that's what we're talking about. And this is the basis of this concept.
But to what extent rule-based world order? But to what extent, yeah, something, no, everything. Everything is right. And Svetlana was asking, about the election. What could be the result of the election held in the Western countries? And this is just the question that the German people and other countries of the European Union may answer, are in a position to answer. But speaking about the kind of emancipation of the European Union from the United States, I have already mentioned. So today in the morning, question came from the Dean of the International Relations Department of the University of Tsinghua, Professor Yan Sui-tun, who spoke at our panel yesterday. So the United States very often impose sanctions on foreign companies through SWIFT system, foreign companies or states, and this is the main financial instrument that they use as a hegemony. And other countries, China and European partners, actually suffer from SWIFT controlled by the U.S. And recently, the government of Russia claimed, that it's possible to take the dollar out of as a reserve currency. China started the digital currency issue. Theoretically, the digital currency may help create a new system of international transactions that will really reduce the threat of SWIFT use. So, what are the suggestions for Russia and China to create a new system of multilateral financial transactions in order to mitigate the financial aggression of the United States? President Putin actually answered at length and detail at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum last week, and we are not trying to run away from the system that exists now, and that is based on dollar efficiently. And all the problems arise from the fact that the United States actually do not realize their responsibility as a main issuing country of the reserve currency, or they probably understand this role, but they abuse it. There are a number of stories when everyone was convinced that the dollar can be used for political purposes, and and it's unsustainable, it's not reliable. And so again, striving to get a system where the universal multilateralism is respected by everyone, and the coordinated mechanism would not be politicized but used exactly for the purposes, for the goals intended at the moment of their creation. So we think about the measures and steps to take when our colleagues will again show their propensity to dictate and punish someone with the use of financial tools and leverages. And I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that no officials of the West in my memory never required to stop the SWIFT for Russia or China. It's just some politicians who appeal, who claim, but it has never found any support in the official statement of the leading Western countries, nor the statement of the representatives of the SWIFT system itself. And recently, a citizen of Russia from the Russian segment of SWIFT system reconfirmed that indeed, and it was officially declared, we want to start de-dollarization of our financial system. And recently a decision was made for our gold and currency reserves not to be kept in dollars anymore, and we have started acting in this direction. But it does not mean, I say again, that we shall stop using dollar at all. But in view of everything I said, we try to use other currencies more and more. And when we speak about bilateral trade with our partner, including the People's Republic of China and other members of SCO and other countries, and we are ready to we are ready to use calculations where settlements that are not going to use dollars but use other currency and cryptocurrencies. In this situation is now a very popular, a buzz topic, and I know that China actively engaged in developing and with some good results, and we keep working on it as well. And I think it's inevitable that the time will come when cryptocurrencies will play a significant role and enjoy a vast segment of international settlements. But it's better to talk to experts. But the Foreign Affairs Ministry actually has a picture of international relations, and we need to make sure that economic links of our country do not create any economic breach in the security. So I guess the cryptocurrency will go up after what you have said. So questions from the room. Good morning. I'm Armen Darbanyan, director of a Russian-Armenian university. So my question is as follows. Presently, we have an intensive trilateral process on unblocking the transportation lines in the region. Armenia, Russia, and Azerbaijan participate in this process, but not Turkey. Turkey, who was a full-pledged, active member of the war in Karabakh war conflict, and who is actually a party to the conflict, a side of the conflict. You know that for the last 30 years, the course of during Armenian independence, the Turkish-Armenian border is blocked, and it's the only block in geographic Europe. It's the only border that's blocked, and there is no communication. The railway that was built during the Tsarist Russia cannot operate. There is no electricity through high voltage lines that were built in the Soviet Union. So do you think that Turkey should be involved in this process of unblocking communications and transportation line and actually bear their part of responsibility for that? And I may add that in this, Iran is another party who does not participate in this trilateral group, but Iran is the side that is maybe very interested. So you ask about Turkey, if we can involve and hold it liable. So the trilateral group on restoring all the economic ties and communication and blocking all the transportation routes. It's not about punishment, it's not about retribution, but recreation of normal economic life that existed before the end of AD until before the Karabakh War that was only stopped 4 years later. And now, presently speaking about the parties who actually got involved in that war, for all the reasonable people, this question is moot. The bloodshed is over. Unfortunately, it finished later than we suggested to the sides of the conflict, and it's not our fault that the war took longer than it could have, and the peace treaty was arranged well later. We couldn't force this or that side of the conflict to do things. We were trying to prevail and to convince that further bloodshed didn't make sense and very dangerous for further life of the people in this land. And now our peacekeepers actually carry out their mandate. We don't see any more large incidents, and both Baku and Yerevan admits it, and some small violations get liquidated quickly. Yes, there is tension on some parts of the Armenian-Azerbaijani border, but it has nothing to do with Karabakh, and at the same time, with the cease of the cessation of the military activities last November, presidents actually agreed upon unblocking all the communications and transportation routes. And this was one of the principles that we agreed upon in the Minsk group and along the lines of OSCE and France and the United States. And to develop this principle agreement, in January, there was a meeting of presidents of Russia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, where we set up all this trilateral group at the level of vice premiers, which actually is supposed to unblock all those communications, the power lines and the railroads are on the table, are on the negotiations table. And the professionals, people who prioritized the routes that should become the first to come operational after unblocking. And certainly the sides should consider the interest of their neighbors. It would be idealistic to expect that 3 parties just arrange or have this agreement, but just don't care what Turkey or Iran think. It would be wrong. So this is a critical point on the map, and many routes go through it, strategic from north to the south, east-west. And it's not the idea to involve or punish someone. It's the main idea is to build the long-term relations and I know that there are still talks about the unsolved status, murky status of Karabakh, where it still has to be coordinated with OECD Minsk group involvement. At this stage, probably they should not just keep talking about the status, but facilitate the solution of the problem so that Armenian and Azerbaijani would live, together as neighbors in safety and economic well-being. And I assure you that if we arrange this life, if we make sure it's done, so all the problems will be addressed much faster and easier. I wouldn't now focus on the statements that sound in the capitals of the region and the capitals of the sides of the conflict and neighbor countries, where emotions prevail. Now it's still kind of emotional thing, and we prevail upon all the parties involved to calm down and arrange normal life for those who live in that locations through our peacekeeping forces, through our emergency ministry. We keep doing it, helping, and the results of this trilateral group will be primarily determined by this unblocking, directly helping to improve the life of the people there. And as for Turkey, the interest of Turkey and Iran are certainly taken into account. Otherwise, you unblock it and it will not have any efficiency. But monitoring the ceasefire, we have a Russian-Turkish monitoring center in Azerbaijan who use the technical tools and ensure joint observation and surveillance on the events that are happening on the ground. This is a very useful component of the agreement that we reached, and it demonstrates the involvement of our Turkish colleagues in the process, and it has become a stabilizing fact. And if you allow, there's a question from Samir Sarana, president of the Observer Foundation Daily. So, Your Excellency, in spite of the fact that the world is going through turbulent times, the partnership of Russia and India keep prospering. So, our collaboration in Sputnik V vaccine is a testimony to that. And India and all the Indians are grateful for the assistance offered by our friends in Russia during the receding second wave. So my question consists of two parts. What are the short-term and long-term lessons to make from the appearance and spread of COVID-19? Many people are concerned that 18 months down the road, we don't even know the origin of the virus that appeared in Wuhan. It does not help in preventing future pandemics. And the second part, how can we balance the national liability and the international cooperation or responsibility and national cooperation to ensure that the World Health Organization and hygienic rules would prevent future outbreaks. So, on the whole, the pandemics and coronavirus infection created unprecedented challenge. If you wish, it has become a test for friendship, real friendship. So, you know that a friend in need is a friend indeed, and a number of states decided not to share their vaccines. Probably this approach is wrong, especially in the conditions of interdependence and globalization. It's an improper approach, and from the human values and the real values, and these values are close to our hearts, and India, that's dear and close and very friendly to us, and we certainly are happy to provide assistance and support, to give a hand to India during those difficult times. Over the last month, I remember we arranged several large deliveries of humanitarian aid, including Sputnik V vaccines and other medications and medical goods. And we work on creating the production site, commissioning production site of Sputnik V in India. And we want really to conquer this horrible disease and protect the health of our citizens. As you know, with coordination of World Health Organization, an intensive exercise work has been done, and experts were sent to China to work in China, experts from 10 countries, including the Russian Federation, as well as representatives of the relevant international organizations. And the results were published immediately after that visit, and recently were submitted to the 74th session of the Assembly of the World Health Organization that ended last week. And you are right, there is no specific conclusion of the origin of reason of COVID-19 appearing, but it's not a unique situation. I'll remind you that by now no one knows about the origin of Ebola virus that we discovered in the 80s last century, but the experts keep working on it. I cannot possess all the findings of the profession. I'm not an expert in medicine, but we need to keep working. But without any politicizing, because the attempts to politicize the situation around COVID-19 do happen, and that's part of what we observe in other areas, and which reflects the intention of some countries to use unfair competition methods. We need to develop wide, transparent international cooperation in the area of studying the virus origin and combating the pandemics. So that we would stop talking, and the attempts to find the guilty party would not prevent curing people and finding the way out of the situation. And the second question, when we have emergencies in healthcare, it's important to have strong national systems of hygienic, sanitary, epidemiological surveillance system of healthcare. And the pandemic actually confirmed this statement. The countries with robust and efficient healthcare systems and capacity for mobilizing medical and other resources certainly proved to be more efficient in responding to the coronavirus challenges. And as for international collaboration, we keep developing. We have been developing for a long time, virtually since the onset of pandemic, through bilateral and multilateral channels, and we render assistance in deploying the international medical and sanitary rules developed with our initiative and approved by the World Health Organization, but so far they have not yet been deployed in a number of countries. And those medical and hygienic rules are the main tool and the benchmark for building the epidemic prevention system, like the current epidemic. So coordinating activities, transparency, capacity and willingness to share the experience and join forces are the key to overcoming the present crisis, and probably I guess those principles are applicable to any problem that the mankind is facing. And the question from Tom Graham, director of Kissinger.
Скажите, было бы возможно, Россия,
the big Russia that within the framework of cyber security, they took commitment to work on counteracting cyber attacks on any country, so to get a ransom that comes from Russia or from the United States to counteract that. What could be the parameters of such cooperation? Or the level of distrust is so high that this kind of cooperation is not seen possible. Tom, I'm happy to get a question from you, and we have, for many years, we've been listening to the accusations on more mortal sins concerning the cybercrime and the elections of 2016 in the United States, a number of accidents that have been happening. Immediately they were associated in public announcements with the Russian Federation, but not a single fact, not a single proof has been presented on that account. And so now just the most recent reasons, President Putin spoke about that at St. Petersburg Forum, so then the alleged attack on the pipeline and the meat company GPS, as far as I understand. You in your question, actually, you asked if it would be possible to set up some kind of cooperation, the U.S. and Russia, to investigate this kind of accidents and to counteract and combat the criminal groups, specifically so when they are asking for ransom. So then, so this question suggests that you are motivated by this upsurge of public opinion vis-a-vis these incidents. And I would like to stress the fact that the American government and the American administration is not promoting so this thesis of making the Russian state responsible for these accidents. So they are not saying that. But Blinken was saying recently, but that's probably private hackers. But Russia must stop them because it's happening on their territory, on Russia's territory. In this connection, I'd like to remind you it's kind of double standards approach, because when there were lots of problems in the United States, the problems were in full swing when social networks, internet platforms, and so they were blocking so the access to information on different issues. This issue was discussed by the OSCE and the European Council, and we suggested that obligation of the United States, like any other country, to guarantee 100% access of their citizens to any information. And at that time, so the American party said, yes, but that's the obligation, commitment of the state. But we are talking about something that is done by private corporations, and we cannot be responsible for them. We cannot answer for them. And that is why, so they're asking so then to stop those hackers, and so to get the state to stop their activities. So they are just appealing to that because they're saying not responsible for the corporations, and that is why we need to be a kind of comprehensive, harmonious. We need to apply the rule of law indeterminately, so everywhere equally, and provide access to information irrespective of who hides information, state institutions or private corporations, because the lion's share of all the information is in the hands of corporations. Now, specifically about cybersecurity, we not only want, we have repeatedly suggested, and sometimes we've been assertive about that, suggested to that state to take care of this issue, to get involved involved in this issue, and especially within the framework of 2016 elections, and when the administration of Obama started to accuse us even before the election day. So they were making these claims, and so we're reminded that between Washington and Moscow there's a secret channel that in the event of any incidents, especially in cyber space, we suggested after so all these accusations had become known about Russia involving in American elections. So we said that let's use this closed channel, provide the facts that prove their concerns. Give us this information. So this proposal was duplicated 7 times from October 2016 to January 17, all the way up to the inauguration of Trump. So not a single request got any answer, and of the relevant services of the Obama administration. After that, Obama, being unnerved and unhappy, so he raided our diplomatic property, real estate, and so exiled our diplomats. And actually, this was the response to our professional proposals to start doing honest and fair investigation. And that's one of the examples. So the dialogue was on the issue of cybersecurity was frozen by Washington, and it's not our fault. So later they suggested that we should go back to it. In July 2017, we gave them the draft of the memorandum of Russia-American Group on security in the sphere of IT, and it looks like the response was positive. And at the beginning of 2018, they agreed to hold the first meeting of this group in Geneva, and the American delegation flew there. Our delegation flew there, but when our specialists landed in Geneva airport, they were given the information that Americans had canceled this meeting and not giving any arguments and reasons for that. And so that's why we keep trying. We keep trying. In September last year, so President Putin during his address made an announcement about the way we could see the cooperation between the United States and Russia on the comprehensive program of peace to resume cooperation in this area, the way it would look like. So he spoke about that, and then after inauguration of Joe Biden, so we reconfirmed this suggestion. Now it's being considered by the American administration, and we hope that in Geneva they will certainly learn about the response of Joe Biden and his team. And then in the UN, so they're working on international information security from the viewpoint of military political problems, and simultaneously a decision was made about the beginning to develop the convention on combating cyber crime. That's exactly what happened to Colonial Pipeline and the meat processing factory. And so that's in both cases, as a result, they found a consensus, an agreement, although before that there were some rejections, but they found consensus on both issues, and that gives us ground to hope that we'll be able to develop this dialogue. But what's important, we need to do it professionally, this dialogue, and not just talk about it. Thank you, Sergey Viktorovich. We've been working for an hour and 15 minutes, so I think that we're coming to an end, so let's take one more question from the floor. Please.
Thank you very much. Germany, a journalist. After your vivid description of America, in Germany, an era goes to an end. It's the end of Angela Merkel as a chancellor, 16 years. How would you describe the relation in the very moment in between Germany and Russia for that period?
Это опять же вопрос, который
That's the question that Mr. Putin touched upon at St. Petersburg Economic Forum. and when he gave his assessment of professionalism, experience, and of Chancellor Merkel, and he spoke about the satisfaction of the mutual work for many years. And certainly we're watching very closely these processes that are taking place in Germany on the eve of the upcoming elections. And we hope that the results of the elections will allow to guarantee, I wanted to say, continuity of our relations, but it's better to say not only continuity that we would wish for, that would be that would be expressed in the form of a regular dialogue, but continuity that would imbue, would take the lessons of the 16 years that have passed, and that would add to it. So President Putin, when he came to the Kremlin after the elections of the year of 2000, one of his first visits was to federal Germany, and he spoke at Bundestag in German. And many, including yours truly, at that time perceived this emotional, very positive charge that he brought into his speech in Bundestag as a good proof of the fact that the historical peace between the Germany nation and the Russian nation had acquired some kind of personal dimension. So it was obvious from his speech, and as the Germans and Russians had developed new type of relationship, and so this friendship that should translate into specific activities in different spheres, and a lot of authority and a lot of policy has been given to it. And it's not our fault that these relations have started to cool down. And by the way, it actually occurred. So there were some alarming signs of it. So even back in 2013, 2014, and when in 2010, by the way. So when Dmitry Medvedev was the president of Russia, there was a summit with Chancellor Merkel and Meseberg, and among inter alia, it was decided to set up a joint committee of Russia and the EU on crisis regulation. Not just for discussion, but so that Russia and the EU could develop joint mechanisms to overcome crises. And so the Transnistria was one of the issues. It was coordinated, but later the Germans party left this attempt. And certainly we cannot but understand that the main reason of not the best condition of our relations with Germany, and so that this certainly can be ascribed to the support of the EU and Berlin, the anti-constitutional bloody coup that occurred in Ukraine in 2016, and so 12 hours after Germany, France, and Poland, by the ministers of their countries guaranteed the settlement of the regulation of the then Yanukovych president and the opposition. They guaranteed it, and it was torn up, this agreement, by the signatories the next morning after the ceremony of signing. And it's not that Germany, France, and Poland, on behalf of these countries, they talked and they tried just to bring order, and they talked to the opposition to bring order in the country, but they even encouraged this turnout of events. And the people who came to power immediately, in their first announcement, identified their Russophobic position right away. So demanded just to throw out the Russians from the Crimea. So then they sent to the Crimea trains with armed thugs, and so when Germany, among other European countries and the United States, took the same position. So this illegal coup, and so they kept silent, and so but the reality changed immediately. The way it started to evolve, and in answer to their politics, this negative politics, so they accused us that we were violating certain rules invented by our colleagues, and when they announced that they called the annexation, so the joining of Crimea with Russia, and they imposed sanctions for the debacle that the European diplomacy suffered, failing to make the opposition to do what with the mediation of France, Germany, and Poland. They agreed with the Yanukovych president. That's how it all started. And but we did not make a stance, and we canceled the Russia-EU summit, and nevertheless Putin in 2014 participated in the honorary events dedicated to the jubilee of the opening of the Second Front in Normandy. And by the way, so they just coordinated this format of the Nordic Four, this format, so that actually later ended in signing of this Minsk agreement. So the signatures were put, and then the signatures under the agreement of 2014. So the Minsk agreements are not followed through, and are not carried out. And to our great disappointment, Germany and France, as the signatories of the Normandic format, are trying to support the destructive position that Kiev is sticking to. Zelensky was saying many times, I don't want just to carry out Minsk agreements but I don't want to cancel them, because as long as they exist, there will be sanctions against Russia. That's what he was saying. But they never commented, our French and the German colleagues, they never commented on that. That's why we really want good relations with Germany, and we really want to cooperate with Germany to overcome the crisis that we have on our hands, jointly, commonly, together, still there. But I really wish we could have Germany to be more willing to negotiate, so we value the position of the Berlin so against the attempts of the stoppage of Nord Stream 2, and we value that. And Putin spoke about that, but he underlined that then it's not that because we're just such good guys. The Germany took this position. It's because we're such, because it actually reflects the root interests of the German state. By the way, so around this Nord Stream 2, so the story is not over yet. It goes on. Just I was reading the regular comments of Mr. Blinken about the Nord Stream, that the United States are considering a way to maintain, to keep the duties. We have the transit agreement until 2024 with Ukraine, and they want us to find a way to keep this transit duty of Russian gas to Europe through Ukraine, and because we want to make sure that Ukraine does not suffer. And one of the options, as Blinken said, is to extend the agreement on transit for many years to come, so that Ukraine would be getting income from transit duties. But if the first thing doesn't work, we need to find a way to compensate Kiev for the financial losses, and this is what the Europeans should do. For their losses. So that's why the attitude of the Europeans to the issues we cooperate so will be certainly checked for, tested for strength many times in future. And certainly we always, both parties will be certainly guided by our own interests, and we're interested in the closest partnership and to deepen our partnership. And there are many of those who see in German-Russian partnership, German-Russian nearing the threat for transatlantic alliance and cooperation. Many people feel that, but that's already, this is the geopolitics of the future. That's time that will show how it's going to happen. So I would like just to thank you deeply because, as usual, so your presentation has been the best point in Primakov readings, and I'd like to wish you good luck, health, and success. Thank you very much. And good work, good results for you as well. So we'll be waiting for your recommendations. Thank you.
Уважаемые дамы и господа, сессия «Индия на глобальных перекрестках» начнет свою работу.
So, dear ladies and gentlemen, in 2 minutes we shall start the next session.
At the global Crossroads starts in 2 minutes. Уважаемые дамы и господа, свою работу начинает сессия «Индия на глобальных перекрестках». Просим занять ваши места. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we're starting panel discussion India at the global crossroads. Please take your seats. Уважаемые дамы и господа, свою работу начинает сессия «Индия на глобальных перекрестках». Пожалуйста, займите ваши места. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we're starting panel discussion India at the global crossroads. Please take your seats. Уважаемые дамы и господа, свою работу начинает сессия «Индия на глобальных перекрестках». Пожалуйста, займите ваши места. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we're starting panel discussion India at the global crossroads. Please take your seats. Уважаемые дамы и господа, пожалуйста, приветствуйте на сцене модератор, член дирекции ММО имени Примакова Российской академии наук Вячеслав Трубников, президент фонда Observer Research Foundation Самир Саран, политический советник Министерства иностранных дел Индии Ашок Малик, руководитель группы Южной Азии и региона Индийского океана Центра азиатско-тихоокеанских исследований ММО РАН Алексей Куприянов, руководитель Центра индийских исследований Института востоковедения РАН Татьяна Шаумян. Dear ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on the stage moderator, member of the Board of Directors of the Primakov National Research Institute, World Economy and International Relations, Vyacheslav Trubnikov, President of the Observer Research Foundation, Samir Saran, Political Advisor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of India, Ashok Malik, Head of Group on South Asia and Indian Ocean of the Primakov National Research Institute, World Economy and International Relations, Alexei Kuprianov, Head of the Center for Indian Studies, member of the Academic Council of the Institute of Oriental Studies, Tatiana Shaumyan.
Доброе утро, дорогие.
Good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen, and the attendees, participants of the Primakov readings. Let us start working at our panel discussion, and the topic, the subject is India at the global crossroads. Before we proceed with our discussions, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers of Primakov readings for our panel, following immediately the unique speech of our foreign minister, who in his views of the current situation, international situation, specifically identified the privileged strategic partnership of Russia and India. And for that, we are very grateful. And I believe that all our panel discussion is grateful to the foreign minister for actual participation in this panel, because he answered the question of Mr. Sarum, and by doing so, together with us, he kind of participated. He started our sessions. He set the framework, and that's why all the people who are here are grateful. Appreciate that high start. And the topic we want to discuss today is not a simple one, as in the fast-changing world, our planet moving to the polycentric principle, which Evgeny Maximovich advocated heartily, grows more and more such crossroads, which become the beginning or the hubs of different vectors of centers of power appearing in the current world. And I think that as time goes by and our world becomes polycentric, the number of such hubs, such crossroads, will only grow. And the interaction of those vectors coming to such crossroads will grow up, certainly. And a huge role in developing such crossroads will belong to the new power centers. In this audience, I have no need to prove or convince that our friend India has already become a regional power long ago. While acknowledging India as a regional power, and we use this term for the United States, Russia and China, we use the name for the Big Five. India is only lacking the permanent membership in the Security Council of the United Nations, and Russia supports India in this intention to become such a member. And with the under the condition of structural upgrade of the United Nations. I believe that our strategic partnership is moving India towards this status quite confidently. And I would like to mention, I would like to go back to a conversation that I had with a representative of Indian community, trade community of Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, Mr. Singh, who visited us at IMMO and told us about the Indian external policy. And answering my question about the main element of the Indian foreign policy, the main vector of the Indian foreign policy presently, unlike the one non-alignment that has been around for a long time. And Mr. Singh came up with the term multi-alignment. Maybe it sounds clumsy in Russian, but it's multi-alignment. And that's what it means in Russian. Multi-alignment, joining, well, differently, many sides. I would like the participants of our panel to express their understanding and explain this multipolarity, and especially our Indian panelists. And one more wish that I want to express, one more comment for the participants, for the panelists, is the view on the compromise as a tool of dispute resolution, contradictions resolution. I will tell you what is actually suggesting this question, this idea. When I was a correspondent of the Novosti agency in India, I was watching a very heated discussion in the parliament between the prominent Indian politician, then leader of the Jansan party, now Janata Vajpayee, who was arguing with his opponent from the Marxist Communist Party. In the break, I approached Mr. Vajpayee and asked him a question. Mr. Vajpayee, I asked, you have just been, we were ready to kill each other, and now you go to the parliamentary coffee shop and hugging each other, How can I explain that? And Vajpayee answered, well, Mr. Trubnikov, it is within our national character. We Indians, we try to find a resolution by disputes, by talking, because we have no Siberia. We cannot send our opponent somewhere far, We can only solve the resolution by talking. And so today I can still ask the question, is this, finding some common grounds is the main tool for India to resolve disputes with the neighbors or in other areas? And another principle that I would like to lay as a foundation of our roadmap for discussion is the question that Mr. Saran touched upon in addressing our minister. And the question, so what lies in the foundation of this difficult fight of India with the second wave of the coronavirus, because the first wave, India survived quite successfully. India overcame it and lived through it quite well, considering the climate conditions and the population and geographic diversity. And the first wave left, as an Indologist, left me satisfied with the Indian government and the society through quite harsh restrictions, but successfully addressed this problem of the first wave. So came out from the first wave quite unscathed. And considering that the first wave also coincided with unpleasant events in Himalayas, with the fights of Indian and Chinese soldiers. And the second wave turned out quite unexpected for me. And India is not stopping fighting with the second wave. And there are many explanations that I heard, but I would like to get the opinion from our Indian participants as to why the second wave. Well, let's just put aside the tricky nature of this virus. But what would be the other reasons that created more difficulties for India than the first wave? So forgive me for this lengthy start, but I would not like to interrupt our discussion and provoke the participants for unnecessary digressions. I hope I have outlined the important range of questions that we are required to that require answers in our discussions about the place of India at those global crossroads. So I hope I kind of set the tone of our discussions. I set the topic. I believe that forecasting the situation today is quite hard, and sometimes it looks quite too brave, you know. But people may have personal questions on the ways to solve the problems. I will certainly welcome the opinions, the contributions, the suggestions from the panelists to carry out, independently by India or within international organizations. But still, I appeal that you be daring in your contributions, ideas, suggestions, because it may become a guiding star for further collaboration of Russia and India. So, considering the fact that our Indian colleagues work with us remotely in the online mode, I suggest that we start with their contributions and speeches, and I invite Mr. Saran to open our discussions.
Ambassador Trubnikov, and I hope I'm able to meet you soon in person. You have indeed carried the flag of the India-Russia relationship for very long, and we are grateful for that. I would also, before I share some thoughts on the topic, I would like to thank our friends in Russia for their very generous and timely assistance, as India was responding to the very cruel second wave of the virus. And while I'm not a specialist in virology or on the theme, I can only suggest that India offers the virus a population of close to 1.4 billion people, and it is a very densely populated country, and it has certainly limited means at its disposal. So if you saw the images that were shared on media and other places, you were able to realize that the virus did, in many ways, exploit the structures of the Indian state, its population, the way we live, the way we conduct our politics, the way we conduct our lives. We were certainly far more disciplined in the last summer, 1 year ago. And I guess what we have experienced should also be a cautionary tale to everyone else around the world to stay on guard and continue to remain on vigil against the virus. But as Ambassador Trubnikov rightly suggested, in the last 18 months, there are some realities that confront India today, which India has to respond to. We truly are at a crossroad. Ambassador Trubnikov rightly suggested that while we did not face the first wave of the virus in the summers, we did have to confront a rampaging and expansive Chinese political system that was seeking to redraw the borders. So while we escaped the virus, we could not necessarily avoid but respond to the clear and present danger that confronted us on our northern borders. We had, in many ways, an unprecedented face-off, violent clashes, loss on both sides, and the whole myth that India and China cannot, will not go to war or go into a conflict or go into an armed battle has perhaps been shattered. I think that has been a wake-up call to many in the region as well as around the world, that the two Himalayan neighbors are serious about protecting their interests, and certainly India is not going to allow an external party to redraw the map of Asia without significant resistance. And I think that is one reality that stares India on in its face. How do you respond to an ever aggressive, expansive China? What are the kind of partnerships we need to build? What are the kind of capabilities we need to develop? And what are the kind of postures that we need to inculcate within our own system to be able to resist adversary that is relentless, that has asymmetric advantage of size and capabilities, and that clearly is seeking to achieve a certain objective that is inimical to our interests. And in many ways, as we emerge from the virus, even as we focus on the development and social and economic challenges that are far more profound, and I'll come to that in a minute, I think the large political question of the world order of the future confronts us. Now, India and Russia successfully partnered together. We worked together to manage the whims and fancies of the previous hegemon, the previous actor in the world who was deciding the rules and deciding the boundaries of permissible behavior. We resisted that. We worked together. We created forums. We partnered in bilateral conversations. We attracted other countries and stakeholders. And we were always a bilateral partnership that sought a fair, open, and plural international order. Can we continue and strengthen that partnership to resist any hegemon in the future as well? And I think that's the big political question, that if the American-led order was resisted, shaped, and responded to, will an order that the Chinese want to put together, will that face a similar collective in trying to prevent the design to be implemented, which is inimical to others? And I think that's the big political question that stares us in our face. The future world order, and which are going to be the key partnerships that will ensure it remains fair and equitable and open. The second reality that we have seen in the second wave, which is more recently, and I am, with my fingers crossed, I'm happy to share that the wave does seem to be receding significantly. Delhi has opened up, and many parts of India are beginning to resume lives, albeit cautiously. But I think what was very clear in the second wave was that our development story, our internal social infrastructure development and investments are still going to be a priority for the country. India, over the next decade, is going to focus the largest part of its political and economic capital on building itself. While we have built a very strong state capacity, you saw the images of the most formidable transport aircrafts flying in oxygens from around the world, medicines from around the world. We were able to mobilize everything we needed very quickly, but we were still struggling to take those supplies to the last mile, to every individual in the country. So I think the second story that stares us in our face is to invest in an infrastructure that is going to cater to our individuals, that are going to cater to each and every Indian. And India's development transformation over the next decade is certainly going to be something that we will have to engage with and focus on. And again, that opens an opportunity of new partnerships. Now, clearly, we'll have to mobilize capital, we'll have to mobilize technology, we will have to mobilize know-how, we will have to cater to the health requirements, we will have to cater to our digital and technology requirements, we will have to more immediately cater to our vaccine and pandemic response requirements. And again, I believe, contrary to much of the commentary that we read, I think an India-Russia partnership on vaccines can be a global game changer. I think if India could mass produce the Sputnik 5 for the world over the next 1.5 years, the India-Russia partnership could serve humankind like no one else, like no other partnership can. And this is only part of the story. Our partnership on other medical provisions, medicines, and health needs is also something that we should perhaps focus on. This is all going to be the focus of our attention as a country because we need it, but it also offers an opportunity to serve the larger global community that find itself left out of the Western solutions that are available today. So in many ways, can we create a development framework, a solutions framework that responds to many more people than just the elites and the Western societies? So that's the second area that I wanted to talk to you about. And the third and most important area that I think as a country we are beginning to grapple with more seriously is the fast digitalizing societies. Technology is changing the nature of our politics. It is changing the nature of how we communicate, how we do business, how we integrate as people, how we engage with the world. Tech politics and the geopolitics of technology is going to become extremely important in the coming days. President Putin has mentioned this in a few occasions that AI is, artificial intelligence is going to be very vital to decide who is going to be the winner of the next few decades and indeed of the century. I think increasingly we will have to focus on technology in our partnership, but also in our other partnerships around the world. And many of India's global engagements are going to be defined by the progress in this sector. So in some ways, these are these three new areas that I believe are fundamental for the bilateral relationship, but also important for working on if we have to manage the changes that are happening in the world. The old relationship of defense, energy, minerals, and other forms of exchanges have to be strengthened. They are not going away. They will remain critical for India's growth story over the next 10 years. We have the potential to be even more deeply integrated as economies, and we must continue to focus on that. Russians are not only innovating for themselves, but they're also innovating for us. And in many ways, Ambassador Trubnikov, you have been a strong proponent of this bilateral. I think the Indian size provides a market for Russian innovation. and whether it is the defense sector or energy sector or technology sector. I think if India can be seen as giving Russia the strategic economic depth to spend more on its innovation industries, and if we can collaborate and innovate together, I think this partnership will offer a counter proposition for the world. It is a counter idea that must be strengthened. The world doesn't have to be American-led or China-led. You have rightly assessed it as polycentric. And an India-Russia partnership is important if the world has to remain polycentric. If we don't partner strongly, if we don't have a deep engagement, I suspect we will move from one hegemon to the next. And I don't think any of us wants that. So I hope we can continue to deepen our relationship. And thank you very much for inviting me.
Спасибо большое, господин Саран.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saran, for very loaded speech and very sensible one. So I suggest we continue our discussions, including and involving our other Indian guest, Mr. Ashok Malik. Welcome.
Вас не слышно.
Good morning, and thank you, Ambassador Trubnikov, for your introduction, and thank you to the organizers of the Primakov Readings Forum for inviting me here. I would have liked to be in Moscow, which is a city I am extremely fond of and have visited many times. It is always a pleasure to be in Russia or be on a Russian platform. We in India see Russia as a very close friend. We also admire Russia as an independent, autonomous, and self-determined strategic actor. This independence, autonomy, and self-determined nature of Russia as a strategic actor is welcome and important if the world is to progress further on the path towards multipolarity, or, as was put earlier today, polycentricism. We are meeting in the midst of the pandemic, and my friend and former colleague, Dr. Samir Saran, has already spoken about the pandemic and our response here in India. I would like to add a few words to that. As he has said, we are extremely grateful and appreciative of our Russian friends for having stood by us in this very difficult second wave. This pandemic has shown us how important it is to cooperate internationally, bilaterally, multilaterally, and keep supply chains open. In recent weeks, we have received 4 consignments from Russia, largely related to oxygen-producing equipment and some specialized medicines like remdesivir. Of course, last year, India sent 81 tons of pharmaceuticals to our Russian friends, which got distributed, I understand, in 25 regional jurisdictions and 60 hospitals. It was part of India's effort to send pharmaceuticals to over 150 countries last year. This cooperation is heartwarming even in these difficult times. Why did the second wave hit us so hard? Very frankly, the virus mutated, and some of the new mutations were more virulent, more transmissible really than previous ones. To give you an example, at the height of the first wave, we peaked with 90,000 new cases in a day, and that was the height of the first wave. Today, as I speak, we are at 90,000 fresh cases every day in India, but we think the peak is ending, the peak is behind us. Because till a few weeks ago, we were crossing over 400,000 new cases per day. Now, why did this happen? Obviously, there will be an assessment and a reckoning of what gaps occurred. the pandemic, the first wave came down very, very sharply in December and January. And there was obviously a pandemic fatigue. People went out, they went back to work, they went back to their factories, they went back to the markets. That gave the pandemic another opportunity to come back. Combined with the fact that we were facing at least 3 different strains, 3 mutated strains, which were more transmissible. In some cases, over 50% more transmissible than anything we'd ever seen. This saw the second wave rise very, very sharply. This is not unique to India. Other countries too have seen successive waves or second or third waves that have been particularly sharp. And while our doctors and our health system did its best and did not collapse, they fought 24/7. The fact is, if you are faced with literally millions of new patients coming into the hospital system every week, week after week, any system will have problems. This goes for any country, anywhere in the world. And it happened to us as well. For example, medical oxygen availability in India was significantly ramped up after the first wave. It actually almost doubled between last winter and this spring. Yet, it was not enough. We found ourselves short of medical oxygen. It was either available in a part of the country where it was not needed and not available in other parts of the country where it was needed. Equipment to locally produce that oxygen near the patient was not available in vast quantities. And here, of course, our Russian friends and other friends did help us, and we are appreciative of that. It has also taught us lessons for the future. Currently, the race is on between vaccination and the third wave. The third wave will come, but its intensity, how much damage it does, will depend on how much vaccination we can achieve. The more we vaccinate, the less intense will be the third wave. And here, just like in the past year when we have sent each other pharmaceuticals and oxygen concentrators and equipment, the India-Russia partnership for the Sputnik vaccine is something we are laying great store on. 6 Indian companies will be producing the Sputnik vaccine, which has, of course, been developed by Russian scientists and technologists. We hope to start producing the vaccine by the end of July. Imported vaccines imported from Russia are already being used and jabbed into arms in India, but vaccines to be made in India would come into play by end July. And in the first year, between July 2021 and July 2022, between those 6 companies, they will produce about 900 million Russian vaccines made in India. And these vaccines will be used in India, of course. They will be used, I presume, in Russia. They will be used in other countries. They will be a global good. And this is important to tell the world that not only do you need more production of critical material and critical equipment such as vaccines and pharmaceuticals and oxygen concentrators in different geographies, but collaboration, innovative collaboration between partner countries where we co-invent, co-develop, or develop in one country and manufacture in the other is important not just for the 2 countries, but for a global effort to defeat the pandemic. That is where we stand on the pandemic, and I do hope that when the Primakov readings takes place next year in Moscow, and if I'm invited once again, I do hope I will be able to make it. In fact, not just hope, I am confident I'll be able to make it. The theme of the panel discussion today is India at the crossroads. Yes, India is at the crossroads, like the global system is at the crossroads, both conceptually and in the case of India, frankly, geographically as well. And every which way you define these crossroads, India's equation and partnership with Russia gains a certain salience. It emerges as a very important factor. The pandemic has taught us of the need to, as I said, decentralize globalization, have multiple centers of production of key and critical supplies. Post-pandemic rebuilding of our economies and our society will take up much of our effort over the coming years, maybe all of the 2020s. Here, the India-Russia partnership in vaccines, in health, but not limited to this area, covering other areas such as energy, technology, the digital space, will become very important. It's a global good. It's good for Russia and India, but it's also a global good and a regional good. Leading from this, the pandemic and the response to the pandemic have thrown up both the attributes and the limitations of the current multilateral system. Multilateralism and multipolarity are twins. They are both under some stress. We are perhaps moving towards a reform in the multipolar system, but we are less certain about reform in the multilateral system. However, the multilateral system and multilateral institutions also are urgently in need of reform. As Ambassador Trupnikov said, one of the aspects of this will, of course, be India's to the global high table as a permanent member of the UN Security Council. But quite our definition of multilateralism being reformed is not limited to just the Security Council. If you look at international institutions tasked with responding to the pandemic, such as WHO, there were structural problems. There were questions of whether an institution designed to deal with health challenges 70 or 80 years was tasked or fit for purpose for pandemics or zoonotic diseases of this nature in the 21st century. These are questions we have to consider. So the reform of multilateral institutions has to be both internal and structural, and also in terms of leadership and representation at the high table. The next sort of aspect with what one leads to cause multipolarity, centricism as was used. This would make for a more stable world, a more prosperous and a more stable world, a more prosperous and a more stable Asia, which we both share, will necessarily have to be a more multipolar world, a world which can, where more and more states and actors, strong and actors can maintain an equilibrium and not allow the revisionism of the few to some distorted pattern. Leads us to the geographical crossroads at which India is located. If you look at India and Russia, we are both at geographical crossroads. We are spanned zones and different regions. We have a stake in the broader region we call Eurasia, the landmass of Eurasia. And we also have a stake in the vastness of the Indian and Pacific Oceans, which we sometimes call the Indo-Pacific. A very important strategic triangle. The Indo-Pacific is not complete without that key axis from Chennai to Vladivostok. And the security of this corridor, the prosperity of this corridor, realizing the potential of this corridor will define the India-Russia partnership in the coming years. As for Eurasia, it is again a historically very region, a region which should be much more of an economic dynamo than it currently is. It is also a region that's frequently thrown up strategic challenges. Currently, these challenges are expressed by what is happening by the transition in Afghanistan. There are many questions, many imponderables that will happen in Afghanistan at the end of this year. But we in India would like to emphasize hard-won gains of the past 20 years in terms of social and economic conditions and political freedoms within Afghanistan should be preserved. And also it is very important for the balance of stakeholders within Afghanistan and in the region surrounding Afghanistan, in its neighborhood. It is important for that balance to be preserved. That balance is somehow dislocated. It could throw up challenges for all of us, for Russia, for Central Asia, for South Asia, for India. This is another area where I think India and Russia have the same strategic objectives, and we should. I'd like to stop there. Thank you.
Now we can move over to those who are offline. So Tatiana Lvovna, please, over to you. Thank you very much, Vyacheslav Ivanovich. I'd like to thank the World Institute of International Relations for this honorary invitation to participate at this distinguished event, which is Primakov Readings. I think that the name of Mr. Primakov, and not only for MMO, but once he was a director of our institute, and I think that his contribution to the re-establishment of Russian East science studies, we owe much to him. It turned out to be that our discussion at the end of the day started. So we continued discussing the pandemic and COVID-19 and its impact on India and in all branches. And it is true that this is a trial. This is a very difficult trial, and I think that we need certainly to express our sympathy to the people of India, and certainly understand that a lot of measures have been taken to curb the spread of COVID-19 in India, and I think that the countries of the world community certainly are trying and will be trying and must be helping India so that we could level off the situation and improve the pandemic in India. But I wanted to remind you of one thing. So the topic of our discussion is India at a global crossroads. And India has been going through many crossroads in the course of its history. I don't want to go into much detail about the events that have occurred, but we need to remember that India has been at the crossroads when India had to make a historic choice and establish its place in the world and the main trend of their policy. And the choice has been made, and that went through the conditions of the Cold War and stood the test of time, and through the conflicts after the first years, India had gained its independence, and nevertheless, so the choice, historic choice, has been made to follow this path of a non-partisan path. Non-partisan path. And so this is impossible to list everything, but I think it's one of very serious crossroads when India decided where to go forward is 1971. The conflict was Pakistan. And this conflict with Pakistan, it was not only bilateral, but other China, the United States got involved, and Kissinger came to Yahya Khan, and from Yahya Khan, so he ran. So for 3 days to Beijing. So this event was quite serious and stressful for the history of India. And the next event that I wanted to remind you of is that India became a nuclear power. So when India had to make this decision. In spite of the fact that all its policy and ideology was against the nuclear arms, but nevertheless in 1998 it happened. It became nuclear. And then in 1998, same year, Mr. Primakov, speaking in Delhi, so he spoke about the possible cooperation of the three great Asian countries, India, China, and Russia. And I think that this moment is a very important point in the history, because at the beginning, so we had some doubts, because we talk about this triangle, so then certainly it would be great if the triangle would have equal sides. But the relations, because relations between India and Russia, then Russia and China, and there were relations between India and China, and which we could not refer to as peaceful and equal and happy, so for the rest of the countries. And I think that we have already mentioned the status of the relations between China and India, which consist of two components. So one is they are adversaries and they are cooperating simultaneously, because the Indian president and the Chinese secretary, so they meet and talk. That the turnover between India and China is on the rise, and it's much bigger than between the turnover between India and Russia. So then China, India more than and that testifies to the fact that the trade turnover much bigger. And it means that the India-China pragmatic plane of the relationship between China and India works. And although there are some territorial issues to be settled, and I think that yes, I don't want to call it a dead end, but when both sides hope that the other side should yield their ground. And that's why consensus in settling boundary issues, I don't see it happening anytime soon. And then besides, so then there is this Dalai Lama is on the territory of India, and the Tibetan refugees, they are in India now, and that exacerbates the issue. And that is why this ability to cooperate between India and China on the sidelines of BRICS and RIP and the SCO, so it actually probably contacts are possible, and ways of resolution may be found and need to be found. What else? I think that India today, that traditionally has always been the center of South Asia. That's ARC as an organization that India participated in, although it was set up not on the initiative of India, but now it's there, and India participated in all these meetings and of the heads of the countries of SAARC. And but for some reason we have not mentioned the non-partisan, non-alignment movement. We have not mentioned that because India chose to be a non-aligned country, non-aligned movement. And this is a global non-aligned movement. And we need to mention that. And today we have other areas of the Indian policy that India pursues. I think that one of these areas might be what Indo-Pacific component is the desire of India to get outside the boundaries of Southeast Asia and participate in the events of the Big Four: India, Australia, Japan, and the United States. They want just to get out of those brackets and get onto that plane. And I think that it is true that India for us is an extremely important strategic partner. India for us is important because we have a lot in common, if you will. Our cooperation at different levels, so human relationship, it's great. That's so important, so valuable. And I think that if this relations India-Russia in future, we really need to develop, improve, and we need to find ways that the existing issues are resolved. For example, so limited trade turnover. We need to change that. Yeah. And I think that there is another issue for India to address. That's the issue about the status in the Security Council, status of India in the Security Council. I think that India, for their own criteria and indicators and metrics, and remembering its role in the global community. So I think that we need to raise this question that the Security Council should actually reflect the real balance of power of different countries, and including India. That I think that should become it is worthy of becoming a permanent member of the Security Council. Yeah, this is what I wanted to talk about. Yes, this is it. I'd like to thank for your attention. Thank you. Alexei, please. So we have this tradition of starting with COVID, and I want just to abandon this. I want just to try to answer this political question that Mr. Saran asked. So the question whether we are capable to counteract the new hegemon. Because during the Soviet times, so the Indian-Russian Soviet relations reached the pinnacle, and because of excellent relations, because so the Soviet Union was one of the leading economies of the world. This is the second economy, and so now Russia is not even in the first 10. And so that's why we are position 11 or 12th, and India is the first 5. So even in the Soviet times, we traded with India with a great deal of deficits. So now we cannot afford that. So everything, the political situation has changed as well. So we cannot trade like that, because in the Soviet times, the system was based on two pillars. So the non-aligned India and fear of China. And then the victory of
The situation has changed. The Soviet Union lost the Cold War and broke down, and the non-alignment movement keeps going through crisis. And now Russia improved relations with China, but India and China have started having problems. The two great powers, don't have enough space, in the region. It's like two big animal monsters who, like Himalayan bears, they have frequent friction, among them, and they're fighting, and sparkles, they send sparkles around. And no surprising that India, that is lesser than China than by the size of economy, and looking for allies like the United States, Japan, Australia, so the other countries who can contain China. I'm not saying partially by chance, because international relations is not physics, and relations between countries is not like a life cycle of animals. Once they are born, then they get mature and die off. So relations depend on people, and that's where we have a gap, huge gap. We had many experts on modern India, and in India, very few experts on India and Russia, and very few experts on Russia and India. We need more experts. We don't have enough understanding why we need to be friends, except, selling arms and peaceful nuclear technologies and collaboration on general matters of international agenda. This is an insufficient situation, and this misunderstanding very often hits our interest, strategic. Sometimes I have my hair stand on end when I read Indian press about Russia being strategic axis with Pakistan against India. My hair stand on end when I read Russian media about India becoming an ally of the United States, or vassal, or a servant to the United States. So I don't want to read things like that. And we keep criticizing some kind of Asia-Pacific Union. We don't want to understand that this concept actually was developed in India, and it's different from the American one. And so American Indo-Pacific concept is meant to contain China, but the Indian Indo-Pacific concept is targeted at improving the position in the region. I believe the situation can be fixed, but we need to understand for that in the polycentric world, Cold War between China and the US, if India and Russia want to remain strategically autonomous, they have no other way but getting closer and become strategic partners and coordinate the foreign policy together. But for that, we need, and India needs, to consider three important factors. First factor is that the rivalry between India and China is not existential. India is not threatening the existence of China. China does not threaten the existence of India. It's temporary. It's like a disease of growth, and no party actually is not interested in regulating the conflict. Once both parties want to regulate, the problem can be solved. Just arranging the lines, demarcation line, and then watching them. And in this case, the dream of Yevgeny Maximovich Primakov, creating this triangle of India, China, and certainly the rivalry on China and the United States is not permanent, is not forever. This competition may vary from Cold War to disarmament, and you cannot use it to build a long-term strategy, because when the US and China go body-body together, they will not pay great attention to the interest of others. So in India, many people are charmed about the American speeches of democracy. I would like to remind you that 50 years ago, the US actually behaved in the same way with China. When they needed China to contain Russia, immediately they called China a friend and never threatening anyone, and the US and China are natural allies to withstand the Soviet hegemony. And 40 years down the road, this theory collapsed. So if I were an Indian colleague, I wouldn't be deceived by such kind words. And third, the mistake is that Russia have always been kind of inertia. We're acting now like a broker and a partner, but we say that we support the ASEAN initiative. When they ask us what are the interests of India, we say we support India. This kind of defensive strategy, this demonstration of support was good after the loss in the Cold War, when we didn't have enough resources. Now the situation has changed, and Asia Pacific is the key region of the politics, and we are not strong enough to allow not to have interests there. We need our own vision, our own concept of Indo-Pacific activity, inclusive concept that would consider interest of all our partners in the region, ASEAN, China, and other countries, and India, and once it matches the big Eurasian partnerships, the better. So we're not expecting us as brokers. The countries know how to talk among each other. They expect us as an active player. And so we could not, wallow in the post-Cold War memory for a long time. We need to go back as an equal player. Thank you for the critical constructivism. And we have very little time left, as we don't want to intrude into another session. I suggest we only take 2 questions from the audience. Please introduce yourself and so address your question to a panelist. Please, on my left. Thank you very much, Evgeny Korinov from Saratov State University, from the youth session. Very interesting speech we heard from all panelists. And this idea as a red line going through as a red line that Asia-Pacific region, or shall we call it Asian Pacific or Pacific Asian or whatever, becomes the main field for global politics. And we would like to hear your opinion about the strategy of the US and other players that we conventionally link to Washington psychologically, like the UK, France, with their own interests in the Asian Pacific. But now we can see certain activity in this wider geopolitical space. Thank you. Who? Tatiana Lvovna, I guess. So let me decide. Alexei, the question goes to you. Should you ask about the UK interests and France? So speaking about those two, the UK have not yet elaborated any strategy, but they're on the way. They are working on it, judging by this announced trip by the destroyers fleet that are supposed to go there and come back. So coming back to the region, coming back, France is a conventional power that has interest in Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, and has territories and has always been an important player and becoming a strategic player, contacting India, Australia, New Zealand, and in a way kind of being an alternative for the United States. So a country that does not want to come too close to the US can always come closer to France. Yes. Yes, microphone here. Hey, thank you for the Sanjar Valiyev from the Institute of strategic and regional research from Uzbekistan. Our President Sharkhat Mirziyoyev suggested at the 75th General Assembly of the UN Assembly to have a conference on the link between Central and Southern Asia. And many participants to the discussions have been invited to this conference that's supposed to discuss challenges and opportunities of this kind of rebuilding links that have been around for centuries between those regions. And from this point of view, probably Tatiana, question to you. Russia will certainly be an active part to this conference. What are the challenges and opportunities for Russia that Russia can see in organizing such interconnection and rebuilding historical links between the regions? Well, I think that truly between South Asia and India and the Central Asia region, between this region, have always had traditional connections, trade and economic links, and they were made difficult by the mountains, and the people needed to work on that and create special places and locations for those markets and trade hubs. But the relations between those regions, even after India going independent, have always been developing. I know that virtually all state leaders who came, like Jawaharlal Nehru, are all leaders among the places that they visited were the states of the Central Asia, like Tashkent, Bishkek, Frunze, and capitals of the Central Asian countries. Students got trained here and there. There was a student, I know that in India students study from Central Asian states. And, what else can we add? I think there are, what kind of contradictions? What are the problems between those two regions? I don't think they have serious troubles that could prevent developing such relations between those two regions. I honestly don't see any. Russia has, they don't need any help, assistance, or mediatory capacity of Russia because they have their own capacities for that. But I believe in terms of trade or getting education for students, there are capacities, and they should continue. And everyone, all parties are interested in improving the position of Central Asian states and India. And I believe that they together, if needed, may even help to contain China if need arises. So I believe they have common interests, including Russia, who can participate in developing this region. And the last question. Last. There. Thank you, dear colleagues and dear panelists. Vitaly Boldarev from the Far East chapter of Academy of Sciences, Vladivostok. My question goes to Ashok Malik. The idea of the Indo-Pacific region is clear, and we understand this is oceanic gravity. But if we take all the states together who have access to Indian and Pacific Ocean, so we have a strange combination combination of the shelf deep water continental periphery that can contact both on the periphery and the shore. So in view of that, I want to ask you, how does India consider interaction with this continental periphery in the context of the concept of the Indo-Pacific region, considering quite convoluted external policy, foreign policy with many checks and balances, with different content and sense?
More than one panelist and by you as well, and I want to address it upfront. Some 200 to 300 years ago, a colonial or imperial cartographer comes and draws a line in the water and says, this is in Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean, these are separate. And you have to treat them as separate geographies, separate strategic territories. It doesn't make sense to me in India. Because given where I'm located, given where I've been located since the beginnings of time, given that I have a western coast and an eastern coast, given that I have had trade relations, political relations, social relations with countries to my east and to my west for millennia, I can't treat these as separate. I can't say that, the ocean to my east is separate, the ocean to my west is separate, and they will never meet. They meet all the time in my waters, in my economy, in my politics. So the Indo-Pacific is a very vast space. It in one reckoning begins on the western coast of America and ends on the eastern coast of Africa. Now, you can't treat that entire space as one. Understand that. And there will be different sub-regions which will require different partnerships, different interests. I have to work in, as I said, the Chennai to Vladivostok zone. I will not work with Somalia. I'll obviously work with Russia. If I have to work in the Pacific Islands, I will work with the Pacific Island countries. I may find common ground with Australia or with Indonesia. If I have to work in the Western Indian Ocean, work with Mauritius and other regional powers. And this is, the Indo-Pacific is not some containment. These are old, Cold War terms which keep coming back. Please understand, the Cold War with two hermetically sealed blocks which did not interact at all was not the norm. It was an anomaly in global politics. Look at the history of Russia. Look at the history of Russia's various dynamic partnerships with other European powers through centuries. The world is much more dynamic, and there are different partnerships, different approaches we have in different regions and sub-regions. And that is true for the broad Indo-Pacific also. We can work with multiple partners, and we will have to work with multiple partners. So you're talking about one strategy for the Indo-Pacific. You show me the sub-region of the Indo-Pacific and have a strategy for that. I'll have to.
Спасибо, господин Малик.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. I believe I will express common opinion of the panelists and the Indian panelists, Russian, that our discussion indeed was at the level of our especially privileged strategic relations. And I wish the audience and the panelists further creative success and participation in the next, I'm sure, very relevant to us and India, Primakov readings. I thank you very much.
Уважаемые дамы и господа, сейчас мы приглашаем вас на кофе-брейк. Пожалуйста, обратите внимание.
You're welcome to attend our coffee break, and the next session on Palestine-Israeli conflict will start at 12:45.
Now we are inviting you for a coffee break.